you're very welcome to the program.
Hello, David. Welcome.
Now, this year, in tandem with UNESCO, you're focusing on plastics in the seas and microplastics entering the food chain. Now, just for our listeners, let's have a look first at microplastics, which are less than 5 millimeters wide or in diameter and are the same size as zooplankton. Now, zooplankton are the microfoods that most fish and even some whales, be it the baleen whale, actually eat. And I mean, there are some incredible statistics here. Now, looking more locally, in the Mediterranean, the ratio of microplastics to zooplankton in some areas is 10 to 1, which is still enormous, but others it's 2 to 1. Now, what solutions to counter the effects of microplastics? What can we do to stop them getting into our food chain? If you have fish that are in what is basically a saline solution that is half plastic to 2 times water.
Yes, it's a big problem, David, and it's new. It's new because plastics in the ocean are a big problem since 20 years, not before that. So it's a new problem. Science is still trying to understand how these plastics are entering the food chain and what risks it can represent to us and to the health of sea also, because as you mentioned, phytoplankton and zooplankton are essential to the food chain. Just to give some number, plankton represents 95% of whole ocean biomass.
95%.
95% of everything that is living in the ocean is plankton. So ocean is full of these tiny creatures that are really important for us, not only as a food for whales and bigger fish, but also to produce oxygen, to capture CO2 in the atmosphere, what we call ecological and climate services they are providing for us. So this plankton is now co-hosting the plastic debris.
Yes.
I mean, it's
mixed. It's now part of its ecosystem.
It's part of it, yes. Yeah. Tiny algae, plankton are colonizing the plastic debris.
They're living on them. They're actually, yes, I mean, they're attaching to them.
Yeah, so fish cannot separate them. So they eat plankton full of plastics, and they eat tiny pieces of plastics
and go into their digestive systems or whatever, however they actually ingest it. But do we actually know what the toxic effects are of these plastics getting into the food chain? If, let's just say, I mean, it is obviously a chain. The plankton goes into the fish gets on your dinner plate. Dinner plate is cleared because you've had a very nice meal. Do we actually know the effects, the toxic effects of how these plastics affect from all the way down up to maybe us?
We are starting to understand. We're starting to understand, but we still need a lot of science and research to understand more precisely. What we can say without any doubt is that there is an impact for human health.
Indeed.
For instance, the bisphenol A, BPA, is just recently recognized as a potential
carcinogen, is it?
Carcinogen. So it's proved, recognized by scientific researchers, and plastics are full of this BPA, and also phthalates and also some additives, inks that are used in the composition of the bottles of the plastic bags are going to the waters. Are going to the waters. So there's a lot of elements to study. To giving some numbers, there is more than 60 different inks, additives, and chemical components on a single object.
On a single piece of plastic, on a single bottle that you might have. Now, exactly like on that point, we can see that, I mean, the Mediterranean, there's a horrible statistic here that the Mediterranean, which is basically, it's a big salt lake because there's only 2 entrances, and well, one is only a canal, the other is like a very, very small strait. The water of the Mediterranean apparently renews itself every 90 years, but the plastics themselves last more than 100 years. So, I mean, let's do the figures here. It's pretty simple that it's just going to pile up. And on the point about the various inks, the various products there are also additives that are increasing the resistance of plastics. That means that the plastics are lasting longer. They're taking longer to break down. What steps are being made, or what steps can be made to go to manufacturers and say, this has to stop, otherwise the Mediterranean Club Med will take on a whole different mindset or idea in people's perception as a place to go on the beach, because it looks like it just turned out to be one big toxic dump.
Yeah, sure. I think that there is a lot of things to do with industry, with recycling also, as you mentioned in the first question. What are the solutions for this? So we are very concerned about going beyond to acknowledge that there is a soup of plastics on the ocean, but we need to work to prevent it. So first thing is to stop throwing plastics on the sea. So this relates to recycling, to water management, to also the single acts of the families to stop using plastic bags, for instance.
There was a little innovation recently about the beer can holders, where there's the 6 things, and now they're biodegradable, and you could even eat them. You can even eat them.
It's a good example. It's a good example. So we have the technology. We have the possibility to replace plastics for bioplastics and biodegradable elements in the composition of the objects, and we can do it. The problem is always the same. It's not economically a good idea for the company. So we need to put in place some policies to push it forward.
Now let's have a look at the Tara herself, this great project, the boat. Now for 13 years, the Tara has undertaken 10 expeditions, has travelled some 350,000 kilometres around the world, going to port in 40 different countries. Now, the results of the research the Tara has done have been put into 75 laboratories with 21 other kind of partner, how would you say, research domains. Of all of the places the Tara has been, now I mentioned the Mediterranean, that seems like a pretty bad case. Of all of them, apart from possibly the Mediterranean, which is the worst zone, or worst ocean zone affected by pollution?
Well, we have this famous plastic gyres, the seventh continent.
So what is a gyre now? Explain what a gyre is.
It's a vortex. It's natural on the ocean. I mean, the currents, they have a vortex.
And they converge.
They converge at the same point. So the debris, every debris, plastic debris, kept caught on this vortex, and so everything has tendency to go there. So these places are quite amazing. We crossed the North Pacific gyre with the Tara Oceans expedition, and we collected some samples, and it's amazing. It's full of plastics. It's kind of a plastic soup. So these areas, because of the currents, are very affected, but we have also big problems around the big cities in Asia, in Europe, even near Marseille. The situation is very bad, but near the Cairo, the situation is very bad. The Gulf of India.
There are hot spots and hot danger zones around the world. Just one quick question. When going through these gyres, I mean, one gets the impression of maybe a ship going through a sheet of ice, like a small sheet of ice. But how deep do these gyres go? How deep does this soup of plastic go?
It's not really deep.
Is it inches?
Because it floats.
It floats.
Plastics, whether they go to the bottom as plastic bottles, whether they float, so it's in the first 50 centimeters or first meter.
Now, I just want to also have a quick look at the very disturbing thing, which, I mean, we're talking about microplastics, but briefly now, because unfortunately we're running out of time. But one of the most shocking things to have hit the news recently was that back in January, 29 sperm whales were stranded on a North Sea beach in Germany. And when the autopsies, or necropsies, I think necropsies, were done, done, it was found that they were killed because they had ingested plastic that they weren't able to digest. They weren't able to pass it through that digestive system. And they died with a full stomach, but because they starved, and they also starved to death. I mean, yet again, more awareness is needed. We've only got a very small time left. What can UNESCO do now to actually get people, or the Tara Foundation do to get people to be aware about this?
We are joining forces for this World Oceans Day with UNESCO. International Commission for the Oceans to raise awareness, because ocean is not on the ecological agenda. Ocean has to be a priority for international ecological agenda.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic to have you today. André Abreu, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you, David.